Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2017 Home Program Overview and Application Guidelines webinar. This is Mike Carpenter. I am the Home Program Manager. Joining me this afternoon is Dave Jordan. Dave's one of my staff members and the grant manager for the Home Program. At the present time, Dave and I are the only two Home Program specific grant managers. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact Dave and I. Our contact information is there. And the county assignment list for Dave and I will come following the end of the webinar. We have a list for you. The webinar will last approximately an hour, and we're going to allow time for questions and answers. PowerPoint presentation as well as the Q&As will eventually be posted to the DCED website a week or two following today's webinar. We would ask to please mute your phone lines during the webinar. And there's a lot of material to cover here, so please hold your questions to the end. And again, we will allow time to answer those questions. So I'm going to go over the Home Program Overview, the general information section of the Home Application Kit. As many of you are aware, Home is the primary tool that DCED uses to support the mission of creating and maintaining affordable housing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As you're probably aware, or if you're not aware, DCED only contracts with units of local government, cities, counties, boroughs, townships, and yes, Pennsylvania's only town. We have opened the Home program up in the Commonwealth to home participating jurisdictions that receive less than $500,000 of home funds annually. They are also eligible to apply. But again, the application must come from a unit of local government or the PJ itself. You can submit on behalf of a nonprofit or a quasi-government arm like a county redevelopment authority, housing authority, etc., but the application must be submitted by the unit of general local government in which those quasi-government arms are serving. Why the need for the revised Home Application Guidelines? It basically boiled down to two things. We prioritize the activities in the Home Application Kit to better reflect the priority needs of the DCED Consolidated Plan and our Annual Action Plan. Also, the level of detail necessary and required for us to perform the necessary and now required risk analysis of all applicants receiving federal assistance needed to be addressed. As many of you are aware, we shared this during the CD&H conference. We were also graciously appointed a HUD Technical Service Advisor who reviewed everything about our federal programs and made some recommendations on staffing analysis as well as program analysis. And one of the recommendations from the Technical Service Advisor was for DCED to look at and revise their Home Application Kit to, again, better reflect the priority needs of our consolidated and action plans and to pretty much concentrate on activities that were needed in the Commonwealth as it applies to the studies that we've looked at. The revised home application should also better position both DCED and you, our subrecipients, to meet the very challenging home commitment requirements. The improvement of subrecipient timeliness in the production, rehab, and occupancy of affordable housing was also focal to some of the revisions of the Home Application Guidelines. As you may or may not be aware, the target leverage and impact criteria is no longer a required component of the DCED home application kit. If you've applied for home funds in the past, you realize that if you did not demonstrate target leverage and impact, that you would not be eligible for an award. That is no longer a primary consideration of the application. However, we would encourage home investments in those areas that have been targeted by units of local government or are still being targeted for units of local government for strategic investments to further both community and economic development. That makes good sense, and it's a good practical approach to community development and economic development is to provide housing in that area. But it's not a requirement to target your funds. We've opened that up to allow you, the grantee, to serve a much larger universe of potential clients for your home funds. DCED's home program is a competitive program. It is not like the CDBG entitlement program that is run out of our office. This is a competitive program, and it will be approached on a competitive basis. As you are probably aware, since the passage of the home rule in July of 2013, along with the implementation of the new grant-based accounting requirements, there are now multiple commitment requirements that are impacting both the home program and its many partners, including DCED and you, our subrecipients. While it is true that HUD has temporarily suspended all but the CHODO set-aside commitment requirements, and for those of you who don't know, CHODO is an acronym for Community Housing Development Organization, those commitments still apply. We're still approaching the application kit and our focus on meeting those commitment requirements moving forward. So a lot of what you're going to see here has to do with some of those commitment requirements. Simply put, the amount of information and level of detail required of applicants should assist, again, both DCED and you, our subrecipients or grantees, with meeting those requirements, expenditure rates, project completion, and most importantly, occupancy of the affordable housing by persons and families who need that, okay? The home program method of distribution is listed in both the consolidated and annual action plan. We encourage you to look at those. They are on the DCED website, Federal Resource Library. It's a very good resource for the federal programs. There's actually a link on the Federal Resource Library for home and housing rehab. I would suggest you look at that. DC may not provide more than 50% of its annual home allocation to the Pennsylvania Housing and Finance Agency. PHFA administers large multifamily rental housing projects, that's 10 or more units, through its Penn Homes and low-income housing tax credit programs. PHFA also administers a tenant-based rental assistance program as well as a home buyer program. Our tentative release date of the home application guidelines will be November 22nd of 2017. We're hoping that date stays true, but the approval process here in the Commonwealth is quite the arduous process. It goes through not only DCED's channels, but it goes through the Comptroller, the State Treasurer's Office, the Public Right to Know Office, and the Governor's Office. So there are many partners that look at the application kit, but we're hoping to have that back and published on our website by the 22nd of November. We, of course, will send out a CD&H alert informing you, the grantee network, of that publication date. If it is the 22nd, our tentative round one application deadline will be January 22nd of 2018. We may entertain a second round of applications, but that would all depend on the level and the amount of awards from our January round. Again, home PJs receiving less than $500,000 an annual home application may apply to DCED for home-funded projects. That is conditioned upon that PJ also dedicating 100% of their most recent home allocation to the same activity that they're applying to DCED for. When we get into the underwriting of those projects submitted by PJs, where let's say you apply for $500,000 from DCED and you have $375,000 of your own allocation, during that subsidy layering and underwriting review, if the subsidy for home is too high, DCED's amount will be last in. So your commitment needs to stand, and we will supplement that commitment with what's available from our end. Home PJs also that have CHOTO set-aside projects, again, if you have a CHOTO set-aside project and you think you have a community housing development organization that will qualify for certification through this office, we must certify the nonprofit for our set-aside funds. If you think you have a nonprofit, for-profit that would meet those CHOTO set-aside requirements in terms of organizational capacity, board structure, et cetera, I would suggest you contact us and we can walk through that process. You too, if you would apply to us for home funds, you would need to match what it is you're contributing or what it is you're asking of us with your most recent home allocation. And what I mean by match, obviously, is you need to participate. If you're asking for $500,000, we need to see $500,000 from you. Traditionally, we provide 35% of our home allocation to PHFA, but we've incorporated language into our action plans to allow up to 50%. It's important to note that during the course of the past several years, we have had numerous issues with the quality and thoroughness of the home applications we've received. We've also had countless issues associated with the timely expenditure of funds and the completion of home activity. Both the application preparation and timeliness concerns were prevalent well before the labor and industry decision on wage rates that was brought to light. We are again prepared, if needed, to award additional funds to PHFA so we don't risk losing any funds through recapture by the federal government or HUD, if you will. So simply put, we're trying to get to the point where we're looking at applications that we as a staff are not working any harder on preparing an application for review than you, the general unit of local government, that is submitting that application. And I want you to give that some thought, please. We certainly want to help, and we're here to help, but we really can't be structuring your application to be competitive to apply for funds. That's up to you. So if your application is submitted and it's deficient and there's information missing and you're not submitting a complete application, we're no longer carrying applications over. The applications either meet the mark to be considered for review or they do not. It's that simple. Priorities for housing funds. We've implemented a new methodology to more effectively identify potential projects which address the goal of creating quality, affordable housing. The home funds will be awarded based on priority to meet the most critical housing needs in the Commonwealth. Again, they're reflected in our plans. High priority activities are rental housing, new construction, or rehab. Less than 10 units here at DCED, okay? Homebuyer, acquisition with or without rehab. Dave Jordan will, during the application review, he will talk a little bit more about the homebuyer acquisition with or without rehab. We are activating a home weatherization deferral pilot initiative. We'll get into that in a little bit. moderate priority activities are existing owner-occupied housing rehab, and the low priority activity is single-family affordable housing new construction. Again, you can submit for, but it is a low priority activity in the Commonwealth's eyes at this point based on a needs assessment. The Home Weatherization Deferral Pilot Initiative is a trial venture. We're trying to determine if home can address homeowner-occupied housing that has been deferred for weatherization assistance due to code or property standard deficiencies with the unit in question. Generally, people applying for weatherization assistance don't have the means to bring their properties up to that minimum standard. So we're going to try to work with our weatherization program here to address those properties that have been deferred for weatherization assistance, to again open up the clientele to address the property with housing rehab funds through the home program, and then of course circle back around once they're off the deferred list to bring that property up to the weatherization standards so they can do the energy and efficiency work that's needed from the weatherization program. Now, a high priority activity. It's important to note that a high priority activity will only receive the priority of points available to it if the application in question is complete, contains all the required information, elements, and exhibits listed in the table of contents. What this means, to boil it down, is a complete and thorough home application containing a high priority activity would technically receive more points than a home application with a low or moderate priority activity that are also thorough and complete. Conversely, an application received with a high priority activity that is not thorough and complete will not necessarily score as well as a low to moderate priority activity if that application is complete. So you only get the points basically if your application submitted is thorough, complete, contains all the necessary information and exhibits. Without that, your application will not receive those priority points. For administrative purposes, again, applications must be submitted by units of local government. Given the complexity of the program, the minimum application amount received will be no less than $50,000. And just to let you know, that $50,000 is actually our amount awarded for total operating assistance. So we expect to see applications for more than $50,000, unless, of course, it's for total operating assistance. You can't do too much activity in the home program for $50,000. At the time of submission of the home application, all applicants must provide proof that they have adopted the plans and policies related to cross-cutting requirements of HUD, as well as home program specific policies and procedures that includes anti-displacement and relocation plan if you're doing rental rehab, affirmative marketing plan, a fair housing plan, the MBE WBE plan, Section 3 plan, an excessive force policy, and the four-factor analysis. If you have any questions on any of those plans, please feel free to contact Dave and I. We'll be happy to speak to you about those, but you must submit proof in the application that you have that plan adopted, what date it was adopted. If you are a CDBG entitlement grantee for the Commonwealth, you'll understand what we're talking about. It's really no different than the CDBG application, but you must have it if you submit for home funds. Successful applicants must also comply with the home statement of assurances and special conditions. Applicants must provide documentation of need, activity design descriptions, and detailed management plans. Projects using other funding sources must provide proof of those commitments. Additionally, applicants must be able to demonstrate that projects can be completed in a timely manner, not to exceed 36 months. All applicants must use the forms provided in the current home application guidelines. Please do not use any of the old forms and any of the old guidelines. If you use the old forms, we will reject them. So you must use the new forms that are in a PDF format for your convenience that will be posted on the website upon publication of the application kit. We really can't emphasize just how critically important a thorough and complete management plan is for the home program. Following each and every round of home awards, we receive requests for additional time to complete activity due to staff turnover, whether it's retirement, medical leave, etc. Your management plan should be such that the temporary or even permanent loss of a staff person does not impede or stop continued progress of the home activity in question. Case in point, we're down to 2 people here in the state office that administers the home program to administer home. We were at 4 just 2 months ago, but our workload hasn't decreased and we haven't stopped working. We're just working a little bit harder and a little bit longer to get done what we need to get done. We expect the same from you, the subrecipient. So your management plan needs to go into sufficient detail to explain who exactly is doing what in your program. That would include, and I'll give you an example like housing rehab. Not only do we want to see who's administering the day-to-day operations, whether that's you or your subrecipient. If it's a subrecipient, you're responsible for oversight. But your subrecipient, who is exactly doing what? If you're coming in for housing rehab, we want to see that you have an inspection service lined up or you have that ability in-house, that you have contractors that are certified in the lead safe work practices, minimum, that you have a radon inspection, that you have lead-based paint assessment capabilities, that if you need to remediate lead, that you have that professional service lined up. This is a 100% grant program we're providing to you. If you need this money and you have a constituency or a group of people that you're serving that are in need of this money, there's got to be a little bit of skin in the game on your end. When you come in for an application, it's not about waiting to see if you get funded to set up a program. It's about having a program ready to roll if you receive an award. If you have any questions on that, if you'd like to talk to me or Dave about that, please give us a call. We can't emphasize enough how we want to see complete and thorough plans to address whatever activity it is you're considering applying for. And again, I used housing rehab as an example. We've provided awards, and I'll give you an example. I won't mention names, but we have an award that's been out for $500,000 where the applicant stressed the need and had a specific area that was the demographics for the housing and the income of the people in that area were critical. We're 24 months into that program, and they haven't spent 10 cents. So you can't tell us you have need and not be prepared to get this program off the ground as soon as you get your award. This contracted entity is still working to put a program together. That's no longer going to be an acceptable practice. So it's a competitive award. The more prepared you are to receive award, the better your chances are to have same. Again, in-house, if you have your own in-house staff, that works too, but you need to tell us who is exactly doing what so we can see that you have a thorough and complete management plan. DCED program and policy priorities for the home. The home program is administered in accordance with the National Affordable Housing Act of 1990 as amended. 24 CFR 92 are the implementing regulations, or referred to as the home rule. The Uniform Administrative Guidance of 24 CFR 200, which is now the super circular that includes Part 85, 87, you name it, it's part of 24 CFR 200 from a financial perspective, and all other applicable laws and regulations. In addition to the above, all potential applicants must confer with their respective DCED home grant manager prior to submission. Make the application for activities that are consistent with the DCED home program priorities, which I've gone over, which are on the slides, and complete and provide all the documentation in the appropriate appendix, and we'll get to the appendix as we proceed here, for the activity you're choosing to apply for home assistance to address.
Mike,
go ahead.
If I can throw in real quickly in regard to the conversation with the home program grant manager, you will get a response email back from either Mike or I that is also going to be incorporated into your application.
We just want to have a 5-minute conversation with anybody that's considering applying so we can address some of what we think are critical to the application. We want to give you as much information on the front side of the application as we possibly can, so we're satisfied that you are in the best position and prepared to submit a complete and thorough application. We'd like nothing better than to fund every application that comes in here. But in order to do that, we need to be tuned in to what it is you're considering from the onset. Applicants seeking existing owner-occupied housing rehab funds and home buyer down payment and closing cost assistance activities, that funding will be limited to a maximum of $500,000 as a town, borough, or township. City and county applicants are limited to a maximum $750,000. DCED strongly encourages all home applicants to only consider applying for what they are reasonably assured they can expend within that maximum 3-year DCED contract expenditure timeframes. Okay? Recaptured funds are a bad thing. Recaptured funds and untimeliness is a capacity issue. So if we're recapturing money, and let me just provide you with an example. If you get $300,000, you do 10 units through rehab, and we recapture $6,000, that's not going to hurt your capacity. There's not enough money there to do another unit, and you may not have local funds to supplement enough of the program funds to do another unit. That won't hurt you. What will hurt you is if you ask for $300,000 and we're taking $50,000 or more back from you, that's not a good thing. So when you're looking at your demographics and your capacity administratively, whether it's in-house or whether you're using a third party, only request what you think you can reasonably expend on completed activity in less than that 3-year time frame. Extensions, like were granted in the past, are going to be few and far between because we simply will not have the time to provide you with an extension. Applicants will now be limited to 6% of the actual home contract expenditures for administrative purposes. Again, if you request $300,000, 6% of that $300,000 or $18,000 is available for administrative purposes. If you only expend $200,000 of that $300,000, you are therefore only entitled to $12,000 of admin. If you expend $200,000 and expend $18,000 on admin, we will require repayment of $6,000. So your administration expenditures must match your actual home expenditures on completed activity. Applicants seeking rental housing, new construction, or rehab or home buyer new construction, funds will be limited to an amount needed to address the funding gap not met by the other committed sources of funds. Applicants must assure the funding gap does not exceed the home per unit subsidy limits in the metropolitan statistical area in question. We will also provide priority consideration to municipal applicants seeking home funds on behalf of nonprofits that meet the 15% Community Housing Development Organization set-aside requirements and our DCED CHOTO certified for the CHOTO set-aside project in question. I've already gone over the administration issues. That is DCED's, next slide is our Federal Resource Library link. I would suggest, if you have an opportunity, to please go on to Resource Library if you have not already. Again, the consolidated plan and action plans are listed there, along with the home program requirements. We're going to link our CD&H alerts to that website eventually, if they haven't been already. And there's other valuable information there you may want to look at. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn the webinar over, the presentation over to Dave Jordan, who's going to walk you through the home application submission procedures.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. Mike has gone through kind of the 30,000-foot level overview of the program, and I'm going to bring us back down to the ground and talk about the actual application submission process. Most of you are familiar with our electronic single application that we do here at DCED, and we're going to require that you continue to do that. Eventually, this will be all electronically submitted, but at the moment, we are still going to be requiring a hard copy of the application with the signature page from the electronic single app. The reason we're doing the electronic single app is you may have a project that needs additional funds, and there may be some other sources of funds within the department here at DCED, and that process through the electronic single app is used to allow other areas of the office to view what you're looking for, to see what they may have available that could potentially provide some additional funds for your specific project. With the home application itself, when you submit it, we're going to ask that you have a cover page. And on that cover page, you should recognize that this is the home program. You need to specify which activity priority you are applying for, the name of the applicant, the county from which the submission is coming, and the date of submission. I'm going to also make a comment that within each one of the appendices for the application, there is a table of contents. In order for you to have a complete application submission, regardless of which priority activity you have selected, that table of contents needs to be answered completely and in full, and you need to tab out each one of those items in the table of contents in order to be assured that when we are reviewing, we see everything that is necessary for the activity you have submitted. The other thing that we're asking for is that applications not be bound with anything other than binder clips so that we are able to pull the applications apart to be able to make the review easier. There may be some instances where looking at a rental housing development project, when we're reviewing it, your pro forma that is part of that application. We may not be able to review it completely without asking for some assistance from some of our other partners or someone else here in the department, and to be able to pull that application apart and give them that piece will make it much easier. We've been talking an awful lot about appendices. What we have done with the application guidelines this year is, as I said before, Mike went over that 30,000-foot overview of the application. And when you look at this slide, this is what the application guidelines look like. If you were to print it out in its entirety, it would probably be somewhere in the range of 1.5 inches thick. You do not need to complete every document in the application guidelines. I'm going to suggest that you read everything before you do anything. And when you look at the next slide, you can see how the application guidelines are now broken out. What is with the green cover in this slide are the application guidelines that Mike went over specifically, that contains the information, the overview of how the program is being restructured, and then each one of those things following will determine the activity that you are applying for. Appendix 1 is rental housing. Appendix 2 is first-time homebuyer. Appendix 3 is the home weatherization deferral pilot initiative. Appendix 4 is existing owner-occupied housing rehab. And Appendix 5 is single-family affordable housing new construction. Remember, you really only need to print out what is with the green cover on this slide and the activity that you are selecting to apply for funds. Moving on, the information here is general application submission information. This information is located at the beginning of each one of the appendices and needs to be completed. As I mentioned earlier, the electronic single application for assistance, that is the signature page that goes with your electronic single app, needs to be included. There is a home program compliance checklist, and with that checklist, it is broken down by activity. It does not cover everything in the home program. It only is in regard to the activity you have chosen. Mike mentioned earlier that you need to not use any other forms except for the forms in the new application guidelines. The home program general application description is a good example of that. There's some additional information that has been incorporated into this form that needs to be completed that is not on old forms. Resolution, pretty much standard fare. You're all accustomed to having resolutions passed for the submission of your application. You need to comply with the assurances and special conditions. Citizen participation. Most of you are all familiar with that process. And there is only one public hearing required for the citizen participation. And within the citizen participation, you're still going to need to hold the public hearing, obtain minutes, sign-in sheets, etc., to attach to the application. Something that is new for home this year, which many of you that are CDBG entitlements here in the Commonwealth are familiar with, is the four-factor analysis. The four-factor analysis must be completed, and you're going to need to prepare a language access plan. The reason being is home activities are direct benefit, and because of that is the reason you need to prepare. You're going to have to prepare a language access plan. In CDBG, if you're doing a construction project down the street, you may not have any direct contact with any of the residents that live on that street. But again, home is a direct benefit activity, so that's why you're going to need to prepare the language access plan. Looking at Appendix 1, this is rental housing development, new construction or rehab. As I mentioned earlier, there are a number of items that are standard through each one of the applications, but when you get into the individual applications themselves, there are going to be a few differences. This is going to look very similar in most all the applications that we're going to talk, appendices we're going to talk about, other than the home match financing plan. And even though each one of these is going to require a program narrative, a management plan, certification of capacity, they're all going to be a little different for the activity that you have chosen. In regard to the home match financing plan, the match financing plan is only required for rental housing development. Because of the amount of the funds that are provided to PHFA and the activity that they're doing with their low-income housing tax credit program, they are generating sufficient match for us to be able to pass that benefit along to you. So if you're doing housing rehabilitation or you're doing first-time homebuyer, you do not need to do the match. But for rental housing development, it must be included. Next slide is probably a little difficult to read because there's just so much information and detail involved. But what we've done is we've broken it down. So let's go to the next slide and we can talk a little bit about what each one of those items are. Items A through I, that's very much similar to what we first talked about, the same general information that are going to be necessary for any of the activities you choose and apply for. As I mentioned before, when you contact us to talk about your proposed activity, we're going to send you back an email to show that there was a discussion with one of us related to your activity, and that needs to be included in your application when it is submitted. Again, I will mention that with the table of contents, you need to tab out each one of these so that we can be assured that everything that you're submitting and is required and necessary for the activity you're applying for is there and complete. Moving on to the next part of the table of contents for rental housing, we're looking at the project narrative. You're going to need to do a community needs assessment, a housing needs assessment. You're going to need to talk about community needs and trends, demographics. Why is there a need for rental housing? You have an inordinate number of households that cannot afford to purchase a home, but if there is affordable rental housing, they will be able to have a means of putting a roof over their head. We need to see a site location map, and we want to see some photographs of the site and surrounding area. Mike provided an example of what's occurred with another grantee related to a project that has not gotten started. I want to relate a little information to a project that we were looking at for rental housing, and the site that had been initially selected was next to a coal pile from an old mining community. Probably not the best site for the location of rental housing. So we want to be able to have some conversation with you about your site selection. We're not going to say you need to change it, but we're going to work with you to make sure that we get the best product for the investment. You need to provide detailed description and scope of work. What's the activity you're going to be undertaking? The type of units you're going to be creating. Looking at program administration, we can't emphasize enough in regard to the program administration regarding your management plan, your local staff capacity, what your development team is, your construction management, to get your project underway and constructed so that you can get it rented up in a timely fashion. We want to see a project completion timetable, your construction schedule, with identifiable milestones in a linear format so we can monitor to make sure that you're staying on task. And if there is something that comes up that may cause you to be delayed by a month or two, we can have conversation regarding that to make sure that we can get you back on track, back on schedule, or that you've built in sufficient time so that if you do hit a hiccup, you're still going to be able to get your project completed.
Dave, let me interrupt you there. I just want to add emphasis to that. The linear schedule and the production schedule that you provide us, we're going to be paying close attention to exactly what it is you are providing us. Much like the request for being reasonably assured of what you can expend in terms of the amount of home funds requested, you also need to take an in-depth, serious look at the construction schedule you're proposing for the project in question. Again, we understand there are issues that arise locally with every project that can cause some delays. That being said, we don't want to just see you throw a schedule on a piece of paper for the sake of meeting the application requirement. We're letting you know now that we're going to be tracking and monitoring your performance as it applies to the schedules you provide for the activities in question, and that is a capacity issue. Again, we understand there are local challenges, and we're not sitting down here waiting for you to have delays. That being said, we expect you to do your best in putting together your application, being assured that what you request you have the ability to expend, and making sure that you're meeting the schedule of production that you're portraying for us in your application kit.
Okay, moving on to site control. We need to see evidence of site control, and we mean real site control, not something that if we get the funding, we think we're going to be able to purchase. There needs to be some real structured commitments to the property you're acquiring or the property that is being provided to you for your project. Schematic plans. We're not necessarily anticipating you to have finished architectural drawings because we know that you're in the process of putting your plan and your program together to create rental housing. But we would need to see what some schematic plans are related to floor plans, the layout, what the units are going to be. Moving into the next point, accessible units. Are you going to have accessible units? Which units are they going to be? Is there utilities already to the site, or do they need to be installed? Another item that needs to go into the construction schedule if they're not already present. I have included also environmental review. This is just a little placeholder because you're going to start your environmental review as soon as you get that conditioned award letter from DCED after the application has been reviewed. And when you get your conditioned award letter, you need to get started on your environmental. You may even, if you think you've got a very strong application, want to maybe get started on it even a little before that. We are only allowing 60 days to get that in. So once you get started on it, it needs to get into DCED after it's completed so that when your request for release of funds is provided to us, it is then in turn approved and sent back to you.
Just a little bit of information. Once we get through the applications and we are making recommendations for awards, once the award process starts, and what I mean by that is after my staff and I review the applications and get them to a point where we recommend what applications should be funded, there's an approval process here in the state that goes through both the DCED offices and, again, to the state comptroller's office, the state treasurer's office, legal, right-to-know office, right to the governor's office. At the point in time, the governor's office is the last stop for the approval of the applications. Anyone that's received a grant award from this office for home in the last 2 funding rounds, you know that once I receive word from the governor's office that our recommendations for approval have received the green light, we start to prepare the conditional award letters. I take a little proactive step and I actually send an email to the contact person that's listed on the electronic single application to give you a heads up, which is usually 2 to 3 days before we actually send the letter to say, hey, awards are coming out, your conditional award letter will be on the way, to give you as much time as possible to get your environmental review completed and returned to us within that 60-day time frame. Yes, that means you got a lot of work to do in 60 days, but over the last 2 rounds of home applications and contracts, we've had 99% success rate with getting environmental reviews back in that 60-day window.
Appraisals. If you're acquiring property, we would like to see, we want to see appraisals of the property. Property is being donated. It does not have to have an appraisal done unless you're using it for match. If you've got other funding or financing or letters of credit in the project, we need to see verification that that is in place and is not going to go away with the approval of the application. Tenant displacement. You may be acquiring property that is currently occupied. You're going to need to make sure that you're following uniform relocation requirements. You're going to need to do a neighborhood market analysis. You're also going to need to do a marketing plan as to how you're going to process getting tenants into your units once you have the units up and rented. You've got to complete a pro forma, and I will add that the market analysis and pro forma, those documents will be on the DCED website in the library. There's going to need to be an overall budget with narrative. We want to see 3 years of audited financials, and that is going to be related to who is developing the project. You as a unit of local government, if you're doing this application on behalf of a nonprofit, we do not need to see your 3 years of audited financials. We need to see that nonprofit developer's 3 years of financials. Property rental housing management plan, we need to see how you're going to maintain the property during the affordability period. And in new construction with rental housing, it is a 20-year affordability period. And we're going to need to know what utilities are covered by the rent that is being paid by the tenants, or if they're paying any utilities out of pocket. We talked a little bit earlier about the home match financing plan that needs to be included. And then also if you have any letters of support, newspaper articles, anything related to the project and the benefits of the project, please include those as well. Moving on to Appendix 2, that is the first-time homebuyer acquisition with or without rehabilitation. As you can see, again, these items are the same from the rental housing. It's just the information that is necessary is a little different. I'm not going to go through the table of contents on Appendix 2, first-time homebuyer, but I do want to point out a couple of things related to the first-time homebuyer program. With first-time homebuyer, there are actually 2 different methodologies that you could be using when you're applying for first-time homebuyer. The first would be you've structured your local program design to be such that residents of the community that are looking to become first-time homebuyers, they find a property that they're interested in, they come to you and they apply for down payment and or closing cost assistance. The other method that could be used would be you have a nonprofit or for-profit developer who wishes to purchase properties, then in turn renovate them, and then sell to first-time homebuyers with down payment and or closing cost assistance. In regard to the down payment, you may have structured your local program design to say that we are going to provide first-time homebuyers with $10,000 in down payment assistance, a cap of $10,000. Each one of those needs to be underwritten to determine what we've been terming right sizing of assistance. Because if you have someone come in at 50% of median and someone come in at 80% of median, there's probably more affordability on behalf of that 80% of median applicant than there is the 50%. So what that in turn says is instead of just blanket giving each one of them $10,000, that one at 50% of median probably will easily qualify for $10,000 in assistance. But the one at 80% may in actuality only need $6,000 of assistance. So you need to keep in mind that you have to underwrite each one of these to make sure that you right size. The other thing that I need to say with regard to the first-time homebuyers is each one of the units needs to be inspected for code violations. We have asked folks that have applied during the last round or last 2 rounds to adopt the DCED housing standards as the minimum housing standard for your community. You're more than welcome to adopt more stringent, but you need to have at least codes that meet DCED's minimum housing standard. Each one of those units needs to be inspected, and any and all code violations need to be addressed before that potential first-time homebuyer takes up occupancy. If you're running a program that the applicant comes in because they found a house that they want to purchase and they say there are no code violations, that's very possible. But there still needs to be that inspection report in the file to verify that the property was inspected and indeed there were no code violations. Kind of a little oddity, which many of you may know, But in regard to uniform relocation, that seller needs to be provided a voluntary acquisition notice. Even though it's a for sale unit and they are willing sellers, they still need to receive the van notice related to the Uniform Relocation Act, and that needs to be documented and in your files as well. Appendix 3 is the Home Weatherization Deferral Pilot Initiative. Not going to spend a whole lot of time in regard to that. Again, we've talked about it. It is an initiative where we're seeing how we can couple two different programs from two different departments at the federal level that are administered out of DCED, how we can make those programs work in concert together to make sure that existing owner-occupants have their homes not only brought up to code, but also are made more energy efficient. Appendix 4, what most of you probably do on a daily basis is existing owner-occupied housing rehabilitation. Again, the activities under rehab are very similar to what we've talked about in the other application appendices, the other activities, but again, there are some differences. If you look at the next slide, you can see that this is maybe a little more legible than the one for rental housing development, because there's not quite as much information required, or the level of detail is not there for an existing owner-occupied rehab program. Again, I've broken it down. These first items are the items that are the standards for all the activities, no matter which one you select and apply for. Moving on to the next slide. Some of this stuff will look familiar from the slide from rental housing development. But when we're looking at something like demographics, because you're still going to need to be doing a needs assessment, letting us know what the issues are in the community. But with this, we're looking at the age of the housing stock. We're going to look at the different populations that are in the area. Are there families? Are they elderly? When you're structuring your local program design based around a specific subset of households, we need to know what the demographics are for that particular subset and why that subset may be a more important subset than another subset of residents in your community. Again, project description, talking about the activity to be undertaken, which is typically going to be existing owner-occupied housing rehab, and it may be for someone else. Program design, including your housing rehab guidelines. Administration, again, very important that you're detailing who's doing what. We're looking for third-party agreements. If you're having someone else do some of the work for you, such as inspections related to either just the inspection of the property or radon or lead paint. And then looking at your contractor list and providing us with a list of your contractors. Can't emphasize enough that you may have a list of 12 contractors. Of those 12 contractors, how many in the last year actually provided estimates or proposals when requests were sent out? So if you only got 4 responses from those contractors on a regular basis, you don't have a list necessarily of 12 contractors. You have a list of 4. And I want to say here related to that is if you're looking at applying for $500,000 and you've got 4 contractors, are you going to be able to produce in 36 months all the units necessary to expend that $500,000? You may want to think about, instead of $500,000 with 4 contractors, maybe only $350,000 is sufficient for you to do your housing rehab. Again, I just pointed out that the environmental review is there to think about. You might want to consider that when you get that conditioned award letter and you're starting to work on your environmental, you might want to think about starting to do application intake as well. And remember, typically for environmental reviews, you're looking at a Tier 1 and Tier 2 process where you do your overall environmental and then you send in, when you've identified properties, the information related to the specifics. a budget with a narrative, if you've got other committed funding, evidence of that, letters of support. And then on to Appendix 5, which is single-family affordable housing new construction. Not really going to go into a lot of detail on it because it's very similar to what we've already talked about. Now we're going to open it up to questions and answers, and while you're pondering your questions and answers, we'll pull up the last slide, which has the home grant manager assignments.
I just want to go over a couple of points before we get to the Q&A. First of all, if you're submitting a home application, you need to submit the electronic single application first. You need to take the signature page of that electronic single application, attach it to the hard copy home application, which is actually different than this electronic single application. You are allowed to submit for one activity per single application and home application submitted. So if you're considering submitting multiple applications, you must complete multiple single applications and submit multiple home applications. We don't want one application with 5 different activities and multiple budgets, we want one application per activity considered, okay? Thank you.
So we're going to go into the first set of questions here. Is there a tentative award date for DCED home funds?
That will all depend on the publication date of the application kit. So I would say generally if our schedule holds true of November 22nd for publication and deadline receipt of January 22nd, it's generally 2 to 3 months until we can get contracts out. So you're probably looking at early to mid-April. That's tentative, and again, that's all subject to when we actually get the home application kit published.
Okay. Next question we have here is, which are the 4 agencies who are administering the Weatherization Rehab Pilot Initiative?
The 4 agencies that are doing that were published in the action plan by the Commonwealth. They would be CEDACOG is 1. Schuylkill Community Action is 2. We have
Lawrence
County Community Action, and the I don't have it written down here. I apologize. I think it's the Center for Community Action in Bedford, I believe it is. They are the 4. And the reason we arrived at those 4 agencies, if you will, all 4 of those agencies had very good success in administering both rehab and weatherization programs under the same administrative umbrella, if you will. So we had weatherization had provided us with a list of proven administrators for their weatherization program, and we had a proven list of administrators for home-funded housing rehab, and that's how we arrived at the 4 agencies to start the pilot initiative.
Okay, next question is zoning approval needed for new rental housing at the time of application?
Yes.
Okay. Next question is, I do not see Lancaster County on your list of assignments. Who should?
Mike Carpenter. Contact Mike Carpenter for Lancaster County.
Okay.
There's only 2 of us. You can't go wrong.
Next question we have is, it is our understanding that you cannot accrue any expenses prior to environmental clearance. How do we do intakes prior to having the request for release of funds form and authority to use grant funds? So usually, this is John Cherry. I can partially answer that question, I guess, is that you should begin to have an understanding of the properties that are on your list to do rehabilitation for. So if you have a potential list of rehab properties, you can start to do your Tier 2 for those properties if you know you're going to get 2 of them.
I think most of you have waiting lists that have been applying to rehab funds for us. for some time now. We're not asking you to actually engage in starting the process. We're saying to make sure that you have your list prepared, that you've done some initial intake, which you've probably already done for those that didn't get funded by your last round. I mean, it's not unusual to see that initial intake in form of an interview to get a basis for whether the person will qualify or not, but you're not actually doing the application for assistance, if you will.
And also on that note, environmental review preparation, when you start to do your Tier 2, is an exempt activity, so you can prepare an exempt form you should be preparing an exempt form for the preparation of the environmental review itself, which then can clear you to do the Tier 2.
Yeah.
The other thing to remember as well is the contracts are backdated to the date of the award. So that 60-day period of time that you're working on the environmental, your contract is actually going to be dated back to when you receive that award notification.
The date of the conditional award letter is the start date of your home contract.
Okay. Next question, if you are running a home buyer down payment closing cost program, how do you document that 100% of your funding, i.e. private mortgage financing, is secured and in place at the time of your application?
You need to be able to demonstrate to us that you have started the process of addressing the funds needed to complete the activity. Obviously, you're not going to have that private mortgage financing assistance committed at the time of your application. I know some people work with USDA in that end. They're qualifying people. That would be a committed source that we've worked with our technical assistance provider on that, and I think we have some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of that home buyer assistance piece. I think we're getting some further information on that, so what I would say, I'm not sure who's asking that question, but contact me if you would in the next several weeks. I've had this conversation with our HUD Technical Service Advisor, and they're looking at that for us and going to provide us with some guidance and information on that. So circle back around and contact me on that if you would, please. I hope to have an answer by that time.
Okay, next question. Will the department accept a housing market analysis that is completed by the applicant, or do you require that the applicant use a consultant to prepare it?
No, if you're talking about the market analysis, if you have capabilities in your office to complete that, if you have somebody that's familiar with market studies, have done the market studies, when you talk about a management plan and who's doing what, that would be a good example to demonstrate or provide to us who that is and what's the basis for their background in providing that. You don't have to hire a consultant. It's not a full-blown market study for the entire county. It's referred to as a neighborhood market analysis, and I want you to give that some consideration. Basically, you're talking about the area where you want to locate the housing. You should be looking at local trends and demographics. You should be looking at your voucher list. You should be working with housing authorities, realtors. There's a number of information and demographics that you can show. We look at the PHFA website for rental housing in the area you're talking on. Is there an abundance of affordable quality rental housing in the area you're referring to or not? I mean, as far as do you need a consultant? No. But if you are thinking of applying for that and you have no background or staff with background in doing that, then yes, we would suggest you look at somebody that's professional to assist you with that.
We do not have any other questions right now. Is there any other questions out there?
Any other questions?
Our next question here is $50,000 the max for Chodo operating?
Yes, at this time, $50,000 is the max.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we will end the webinar for the day. Again, please feel free to reach out to Dave or I if you have any questions about what we have presented this afternoon. Again, we will be sending out a CD&H alert as soon as we know of the availability to publicize the new home application kit for your review and use. And once we send that CD&H alert about the publication of, we will also set the round 1 application deadline at that point. Again, tentatively, we're hoping for November 22nd and again, January 22nd. Okay? Thank you very much to all that have joined us this afternoon. We appreciate it. And again, please feel free to follow up with either Dave or I. And Lancaster County apologize for the omission of Lancaster County on the slide, but there's only 2 of us, so if you are in a county that isn't listed there, we apologize. Feel free to give us a call.